So venture capital trusts, maybe the best way to see them is that when you invest in one of these, if you're assuming you're a UK taxpayer, you're really entering into a 5-year partnership with HM Treasury to help fund some of the most innovative and dynamic new companies that are operating in the UK. And the way this works is that VCTs will regularly issue new shares, and if you buy those shares when they're newly issued and you meet all the right criteria, you're entitled to claim 30% of your investment back against to offset against your income tax liabilities in that tax year. And there are other tax benefits too, providing that you don't invest more than £200,000 in any one tax year, and that includes if buying shares new and secondary, then any dividends you receive will be tax-free, and if you sell the shares at the end of your holding period at a profit, you don't pay capital gains tax. So these are really significant tax benefits granted by the government and by successive governments actually ever since 1995. So these should be seen as something which have really kind of cross-party support in the UK system. I think most fund managers like ourselves would argue that they play a very important role in the funding of new businesses, and I hope we can illustrate that with looking at the way some of our investments have progressed over the last 5 or 6 years. Amati AIM VCT, as it says in the name, invests on a market that's referred to very often as AIM. It stands for Alternative Investment Market. It's London's junior stock exchange. And again, a bit like VCTs, the AIM is something which successive governments over the last 25 years have invested by granting it significant tax benefits for investors. And one of those benefits is that shares that are quoted on AIM qualify for investments from both VCTs and Enterprise Investment Scheme, EIS investments. They also, almost uniquely in UK company investing, don't have to charge stamp duty on purchases. So the idea of the kind of investments that we make, or any VCT has to make, is a fundamental idea in this is the idea of a qualifying investment. So what is a qualifying investment? Well, these are defined at great length by the VCT legislation, and they're very tightly drawn up to make sure that VCTs invest in companies that are both operating in the UK but have real growth opportunities, and where the money that goes into the VCT then gets invested into that company in such a way that it drives growth in that business. There are many companies that don't qualify for this. There are some that are too old, many that are too big, some that are doing the wrong things. And so we have to, every time we make a new investment from the VCT, we have to consult advisors and ensure that the companies we're investing in meet these criteria. And if they do, they become qualifying investments in the portfolio. And the portfolio is really dominated by qualifying holdings. So this is the most important concept to understand in investing in a VCT. And just to illustrate how our qualifying holdings have sort of progressed over the last 5 years, in some ways we could even usefully wind back even further. When I first started investing in VCTs, it was at one of my former companies, employers, called First State Investments, where actually Amati, the original Amati VCT, grew out of the First State Investments AIM VCT. And in those days when we were making new investments, the companies were very often capitalised at 20, 30, 40 million pounds. So that capitalised is an estimation of how much of the company is being valued at by the stock market. And it's a good measure of maturity in a company. Companies which are obviously worth very large amounts of money tend to be more mature businesses. They've progressed further down the route. So one thing that has been very remarkable over the last decade of Amati AIM VCT's life is just watching how the companies in the portfolio have matured in this sense, how they've become much more valuable businesses over time. And if we just start by rewinding the clock to 2016, you can see on this particular slide here, this is showing our portfolio in the form of bubbles. We call it a bubble graph. And on the bottom axis, you can see when we invested in the companies. Some of these go way back to the early part of the century. And the size of the bubble shows you the size of the investment at the time. And on the left-hand side of this axis, you can see the market capitalization of these companies. And already by 2016, it was a very different picture from 5, 6, 7 years before, where you can see there's a whole cluster of companies here that are valued at more than £100 million in market capitalization terms. And we'll just very quickly wind the clock forwards, going through this by a couple of years. Here you can see 2017, already by this stage some companies have become worth more than £500 million, GB Group, Quicksent. And obviously the fortunes of these companies ebb and flow. They're always, stock market valuations are always a very fluid thing. Companies have their ups and downs, but the characteristic of VCT investment is we tend to be one of the longest term investors in the stock market. And when we make a new investment in the VCT, we're really looking for companies which are suitable for that kind of long-term investing, where if we assume that we're going to be holding these companies for 10 or even 15 years, we want them to be able to be much larger businesses over that period of time. And you can see this happening here. 2017, I think this was the first year one of our holdings exceeded £1 billion in market capitalization terms, which, had it been unquoted, would have classified it as a unicorn. They don't tend to use that unicorn phrase for quoted companies. But Keywords was the first of our investments to make it to that size. And then here's 2019, GB Group's now joined it over that size. And 2020, you can see it's more growth in the mature holdings in the portfolio. But you can also see what's happening in this year is that you can see where our new investments are going. And so all those little bubbles right on the right-hand side of this slide, those are the new investments we're making. And every year we'll come out with a share offer, we'll raise some new money, and the idea is we're putting money into those new bubbles there on the right-hand side, these new companies. Over the past couple of years, you'll find that there's a lot of those companies have been involved in healthcare. That's partly because we think that we thought for a number of years that the healthcare sector's one of the major investment opportunities that's been bubbling away for many years, but it's reached a point of maturity where quite a number of healthcare technologies that have been in development for a long period of time are now reaching commercialization. And so we very consciously targeted quite a bit of our investment into that sector. It's also a sector that needs a lot of funding and is ideal for VCT type investment. And you can see some of these names on this slide. You can see Synergen, Polarian Imaging, and Diaceutics. These are all healthcare businesses that have come into the portfolio over the last couple of years. And then finally, if we rewind on to March 2021, you can see where the most mature companies in the portfolio, Keywords, is now close to £2 billion in market cap. We have 4 companies in there capitalised at more than £1 billion. And you can see how some of the newer investments have gained in size, and particularly Polarian Imaging, actually now the largest qualifying investment in the portfolio. And this is a company which has a completely new technology for imaging the lung, and we think it's got a very exciting future. It should only be a matter of 6-7 months away from hopefully receiving the FDA approval in the States for its device, and we think it's bringing a really significant technology to market that will make a real difference in our ability to diagnose lung diseases of various types. There's lots more I could say about the VCT. I hope this is just a quick snapshot introduction to give you the flavour, to show you how we value long-term investment in this fund, and almost uniquely, because if we sell one of these holdings, we can't buy it back in the VCT. So we have more, if you like, incentive to be long-term about our investing than almost any other type of fund manager. And that's Amati AIM VCT. Thank you.